let's take this further with Andy Mock. He's a professor at Beijing Foreign Studies University and author of The Innovation Machine: How China Creates and Adopts Technology Through Governance. Welcome back to the program, Andy. Now, China's growth came in stronger than expected despite this ongoing pressure of the Hormuz blockade. How sustainable is this momentum then?
Well, Teeb, I think these numbers aren't a surprise at all, and they're really the payoff from decades of relentless government policy and investment in manufacturing capability, workforce development, and industrial infrastructure. So I think we can expect these stronger numbers to continue the foreseeable future. And I think regarding the energy situation, China is far more insulated than other global powers because, first of all, even though it is the largest energy importer in the world, more than 50% of China's energy mix is domestic coal, with an increasingly growing share from renewables like solar. So I think, again, China's well insulated. It also doesn't suffer from these political issues of, say, midterm elections or where rising prices at the gas pump can cause enormous political pain and danger for the political leadership.
Now, we are still seeing weak retail sales and rising unemployment. How concerned should markets be about low domestic demand?
Well, one of the clouds, and I think one of the concerns about the Chinese economy is the real estate situation. And I think here it's important to point out that this was not a crisis in the sense that this happened to China unexpectedly. But I would think of it more as open heart surgery. And this was a very deliberate policy choice. I think the government knew would be painful, would be risky, and would take a while to recover from, but at the same time, still very, very necessary. So while I think you're right, retail spending is weak, but in absolute terms, we are talking adding the equivalent of a small country's GDP every year. So yes, I think the retail sales growth as percentage terms is lower than it has been in the past. But in absolute terms, I still think it's a very, very big number.
And how prepared do you think China's factories are against the risk of lower demand globally for its products, given the current economic climate?
Well, Teeb, I think for any business, any business prefers growing markets, optimistic customers. But at the same time, we've seen Chinese exports in pretty much all sectors, but most recently, especially in electromechanical equipment, growing very, very strongly. And I think, the reason for this is that, China has established its position as not only a source of inexpensive products, not just end products, but components, but also well-designed, high-quality ones as well. And I think that kind of quality is always in demand, whatever the economic situation happens to be.
So do you think the stronger data reduces the urgency for Beijing to roll out more stimulus this year? And how could investors be pricing that in?
Well, I think, the longer term strategy, we look at the 15th five-year plan. And I think we have to look at it in conjunction with the 16th five-year plan, because 2035 is a very important date for China's vision to become a leading power by 2049. So I think these priorities are not going to change. So, the government does want stronger consumer sentiment, more consumer spending. But I think the priority is this transition to high quality growth, which means technology based, which means more environmentally sustainable, and is largely, I would say, a supply side phenomenon versus prioritizing growing demand, especially in the consumer sector.
And how vulnerable could China's growth trajectory be to the pressure of global trade disruptions and energy markets?
Well, I think, we've seen China demonstrate enormous resilience in terms of trade disruptions, starting with the Liberation Day tariffs. And of course, exports to the U.S. have gone down significantly. But a portion of that, I think, might be rerouted, but also other markets have grown for China. Energy, I think you're absolutely right, because it's not just fuel, but it also is a critical input into many industrial processes, even consumer goods. So this is certainly, I think, a concern. And, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why I think China is really paying very close attention and doing its part to resolve this unfortunate conflict in the Middle East.
Great to have your analysis, Andy Mock from the Beijing Foreign Studies University. Thank you very much.